So a very good morning to all of you here, the trainees of the first training on mountain heritage and nature culture linkages. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce Dr. Edwin Bernbaum as your keynote speaker today, and he is the former co-chair of the IUCN Specialist Group on Cultural and Spiritual Values of Protected Areas (CSVPA). He is the author of the accepted authority on sacred mountains of the world. So he's authored a wonderful book which covers everything from the Andes to the South to Southeast Asia. He holds a AB in mathematics from Harvard College and a PhD in Asian Studies from the University of California at Berkeley, from where he's joining us right now. So it's 8:30 in the evening for him, and we really appreciate the fact that he has joined us today. Amongst other landscape-based work, he has worked at a project in Badrinath. So this is a temple which you will be visiting as part of your field tour, meaning it's closed right now, but you will be going in the same area as Badrinath as part of a field tour. And Ed has also worked with the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICMOD, which is one of the important organizations you know about. And he has worked on getting the Mount Kailash landscape across India, Nepal, and China nominated as a mixed world heritage site, which is, of course, a work in progress right now. And with that, I would pass it on to you, Dr. Burman. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the excellent introduction. It's a pleasure to be speaking. It's been, I guess, since 2016 since I was in India. And the last time I was in India, I was there at your institute working on this project to try to get Mount Kailash nominated as a World Heritage Site, Kailash Sacred Landscape. So I'll be talking about sacred mountains around the world. All the pictures that you'll see are ones that I've taken over the years. And just to give you a little bit of background as to how I got into it, my father was a diplomat, and my earliest memories are of snow-capped peaks. Let me get down here. Snow-capped peaks on the equator in Ecuador. Uh, I was there between the ages of 2 and 5, like this peak, Cotopaxi, which was once thought to be the highest active volcano in the world. I returned when I was 15, and I was drawn up to the mountains. There was something magical and very alluring about them. And I began climbing with an Ecuadorian mountaineering club, so I was climbing in Spanish. And then after I graduated from college, I went with the American Peace Corps to Nepal. And while I was there, I went on an expedition to a peak in the Annapurna Range. Annapurna is the 10th highest mountain in the world, to South Annapurna, which you can see a view of here. And you notice a cloud coming down. This expedition ended, it was in a sacred valley on a sacred mountain because Annapurna is named for the goddess Annapurna, who's the presiding goddess with Lord Shiva over Varanasi, as those of you who are in India probably know. Um, you can see here this cloud coming down. This is an avalanche, and we were trying to go up here, and a hanging glacier up there broke off above us, and I was swept down in a huge avalanche, maybe 1,000 feet down. 300 meters or so buried, and I managed to get out of it in a rather unusual way, but it was rather a turning point in my life. And after that, before leaving Nepal, I went out to the area around Mount Everest, and this is the monastery of Tengboche, Tibetan Buddhist monastery in the southern Sherpa country of Khumbu on the south side of Mount Everest. It's the principal monastery on the south side of Everest. And the peak that you see above is about just under, well, over 6,000 meters high. And we climbed it, much to my amazement. It's the most difficult peak I'd ever climbed. And I thought we had made the first descent of an unclimbed peak for about 11 years. And then I ran into somebody who climbed it before us. But 11 years was a good run, and we had climbed it by a new route. Now I came back down from the monastery and wound up trekking back to Kathmandu. This was back in 1968 with the abbot, Rinpoche, or head lama of the monastery. It was about an 11-day trek through the mountains. There weren't too many roads in Nepal in those days. And along the way, I learned about a Tibetan myth of a hidden kingdom, which I wrote my first book about. But in the meantime, I came back on projects to list and microfilm Tibetan texts at his monastery. And on one of these trips, he gave me this Tibetan nobleman's robe. So, in looking at myths and legends of hidden valleys, which is what I originally got into, and when I did my PhD, I was interested in basically Hinduism and Buddhism in India, the Himalayas, and Tibet, and larger issues of comparative religion and mythology, which got me interested in what mountains mean to people and cultures all over the world. And since your course is on mountains and mountain cultural landscapes, one thing that people often think is the subject of sacred mountains and their sacredness is esoteric. It really isn't, because as we'll see here, and I'm sure a lot of you also know, when mountains are sacred, they're automatically associated for various reasons with the highest and deepest values and aspirations of a culture. So they take you straight into the heart of what a culture is all about. So in doing this, I looked at what mountains in general did, and I came up with this formulation. Mountains evoke an experience of something of deeper significance or reality that gives meaning and vitality to people's lives. This covers a lot of sacred mountains, perhaps not all of them. And you should notice when you say deeper significance or reality, this may or may not be a religious significance. It could be a deeper significance of feeling one with nature, for example, and that would be an experience of the sacred in nature without having to believe in a deity, for example. Now, in the course of this, I found that people experience that something of deeper significance or reality through the views they have of mountains. And in looking in mountains around the world, I've identified 10 views or themes that are particularly widespread. And these 10 themes that we're going to look at in the body of this talk provide a framework for understanding the diverse roles that sacred mountains play in different cultures, as well as we'll see a framework to apply not only to conservation and coming up with conservation measures, but also in evaluating World Heritage nominations. And I know a lot of you are going to be studying about World Heritage and have experience in it. Now, I've chosen mountains that I have visited and are familiar with and have researched, and I'm going to use them as examples. And many of the examples that you'll see that come with each of these 10 views of mountains is a World Heritage Site. Now, I know a lot of you are from countries where these mountains don't exist, but you have your particular mountains and mountain landscapes. So think about how the framework can apply to examples from where you live and where you work. So let's begin with the most obvious view of mountains, which is the mountain is a high place, the theme of height. And of course, the mountain that exemplifies that, particularly where you are in your part of the world, is Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. This is a picture I took of it from Tibet and alpenglow with the planet Jupiter right next to the summit. Now, mountains are revered as high places for various reasons, but one of them is the summit of the mountain is the closest place on earth to the sky, and the sky is associated with ideas of heaven and divinity. Now, Everest is quite interesting because it's sacred, I would say, in a secular sense, as the highest mountain in the world, which imbues it with a particular mystique that focuses a lot of attention on it, and it represents an ultimate value. And one aspect of the experience of the sacred is it's something of ultimate value or concern. For many people, particularly in the West where I live, whatever is number one has some sort of ultimate value, and Everest is the number one highest mountain. So it also comes to symbolize the highest goal you can strive to attain, whether your pursuit be spiritual or material. Now, the most famous reason, and here is let me just talk a little bit about the name of the mountain. The name is Everest. It was named for Sir George Everest, who was head of the British Survey of India in the middle of the 19th century. And so when a clerk discovered through triangulation that Everest was the highest mountain in the world, it's not at all obvious from the plains of India or even most parts of Nepal that it's the highest. They decided to name it after Everest. It has two other names that a lot of you are probably familiar with. The Tibetan name is Chomolungma, which we're going to look at a little more closely, or Jomolangma, more properly in Tibetan. And also the Nepali name is Sagarmatha, and Everest is in Sagarmatha National Park, which is a World Heritage Site, chosen as a natural World Heritage Site for its beauty and its exceptional qualities, of course. Now, the most famous reason given for climbing mountains is one that George Mallory, who disappeared on Everest in the 1920s, was supposed to have said. I think to get people to stop bothering about why he was going to climb Everest, but he said because it's there. And I think you have to ask a second question about this. Why do people repeat it? At least where I live in my part of the world, they do. You have to ask, what is the it that's there? And I would say that for many climbers, both East and West, Sherpas and others, people from India, the it that's there is that something of deeper significance or reality that's worth risking your life for, and which Mallory lost his life in quest of. So let's take a look at the name of Mount Everest in Tibetan. It's Chomolungma, or more properly, Jomolungma. Now, until recently, this has been almost always mistranslated as Goddess Mother of the World or Goddess Mother of the Universe. This is because outsiders project their values onto the Tibetans and Sherpas who live around the mountain and assume that it must be the abode of a supremely important deity. This is not, in fact, the case. First of all, there's no goddess mother of the world in Buddhism. Buddhism is not that kind of religion. Secondly, what you have is the Tibetan language is monosyllabic. So when you have it means each syllable, as in Chinese, is a word or is a meaning. So if you have a string of syllables, what you do in Tibetan is you compress the syllables to a few. Now, the goddess of the mountain, whom you see portrayed on the left, her name is Jomo Miolang Sangma, and Jomo Langma is short for the name of the goddess. You can see I've underlined Jomo's goddess, Miolang Sangma, so it becomes Jomo Langma. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are two categories of deities. There are the mundane deities. You appeal to them for long life, worldly benefits, wealth, food, that sort of thing. And then there are the transcendent or higher deities that have to do with attaining enlightenment, or if it's in Hinduism, moksha or release. And she belongs to this lesser category of deities. Now, if you're looking for the higher category, this is associated with the next theme that we're going to look at, which is the mountain as center, center of the universe, center of the world, center of a region. And especially in Asia, much more so than in the West, mountains are very important because they're viewed as sacred centers, and in particular, they're cosmic axes that link the depths of hell to our world to the heights of heaven. And the mountain that exemplifies this for many people in Asia and is the most sacred mountain in the world for up to 1 billion people, not 1 million, but 1 billion people, followers of at least 4 religions, including Hinduism and Buddhism, is Mount Kailas in Western Tibet. Kailas or Kailash comes from the Sanskrit. It's the Sanskrit word. The Tibetans call it Kang Rinpoche, which you see here, the other name for it. And for both Hindus and Buddhists, and I think Jains as well, for example, the mountain is viewed as a physical manifestation of a mythical mountain at the center of the universe called Mount Meru or Mount Sumeru. This is a depiction of it. The mountain rises. It's surrounded by 7 rings of golden mountains. There's a outer ocean, and this is the world in which we live, floating in a continent to the south. The mountain opens like a flower. On the summit of it is the king of the gods, Indra, and then clouds that represent stages of trance or meditation above it. And this mountain completely dwarfs Mount Everest. It's 80,000 yojanas high. Yojana is, 2 to 3 kilometers, so you can see it's just immense. And it has its roots 80,000 yojanas deep in hell. So it's a cosmic axis that unifies things. So when people come to this mountain, the ritual, and we'll look at Kailas a bit more later on, the ritual is to circumambulate the mountain, to treat it as you would a religious monument like a stupa, and not to climb it. So this is a Tibetan pilgrim who's just done the circumambulation. It's about 30 kilometers around. You go over a high pass, almost 6,000 meters high. And in coming to a place like this, not only do you touch the center of the universe, but what that corresponds within yourself, the center within yourself. And you can see that this woman has come for the spiritual experience of a lifetime, very important for her. And this mountain is very remote. It's in a remote, far western part of Nepal or Tibet, where, relatively few people live. Now, this is linked to, and a lot of these different views, they interrelate. And I should point out, a mountain can be sacred in many different ways, reflecting different themes. So the next theme we're going to look at is the mountain as a place of power. And that power can be physical, spiritual, or political. What you see here, the mountain that's representing it, is a mountain called Kilauea, which is in Hawaii, the islands of Hawaii. It's very sacred for the native Hawaiians, and it's in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, which is also a World Heritage Site. And here you can see the physical power of the volcano. This is an eruption that I witnessed last summer. Since about over a year ago, Kilauea has been erupting very regularly every 1 to 2 weeks, with plumes going up as high as 300 meters or more. This was a somewhat smaller one. But here you can see the power of the volcano, this is what you're seeing now. Let's see, can everyone hear this? Can everyone hear this? Yes? Raise a
Yes,
hand.
yes,
Okay, so this is the eruption. You can see the lava streaming out. It's maybe 1500, 1700 degrees centigrade, very, very hot. And you see it's flowing like water. Very, very impressive. Now, I directed a program called the Sacred Mountains Program for an organization called the Mountain Institute, which also worked in Nepal and worked closely with Isimot as well, and in the United States. And a project they started was working with U.S. national parks. And when we came, we worked with basically with interpretive staff at national parks, and this would be of interest to you in your course, which is we worked on them on developing interpretive materials that were not simply informative exhibits that not only just told people about things, but elicited deeper ways of experiencing what they were seeing in order to establish a connection with nature that would make them want to preserve and protect it, and the parks in particular. So, what we did was we looked at what are the spiritual, cultural, aesthetic associations that different features of nature have in cultures around the world, not only in the United States, but India, China, Africa, various places. And when I came to Hawaii volcanoes, there was a committee of native Hawaiian elders called the Kapuna Committee. Kapuna is an elder in the Hawaiian language, and they were working with the park as a cultural advisory body, and they were rather upset with the painting of Pele. First of all, I should point out, and we'll look at the next theme, it has to do with mountain as a place of a deity. Um, the volcano is supposed to be an expression of the power of Pele, who's a fire goddess or the volcano goddess of the mountain. And there was a painting of her in the visitor center that was done by somebody from the mainland who was not native Hawaiian, somebody named Hitchcock in the 1920s. And if you look closely, she has Caucasian features. Her hair is on fire. So, as I like to put it, she looks kind of like a surfer from Southern California, a blonde surfer. So when we arrived in the scene, we had funds from the Ford Foundation that we made available to come up with a better painting that would express what Pele meant for Native Hawaiians, what the Kapuna Committee did. So we put together with them a press release asking people to come up in consultation with their elder and opening it to everyone to submit paintings to have a painting to replace this. So the press release went out to the two major newspapers in Hawaii, which were on a different island. Kilauea is in what's called the Big Island, where the active volcanoes are. The capital of Hawaii is in Honolulu. And so the two newspapers there did front page articles because Pele is very important, not only for Native Hawaiians, but a lot of people in Hawaii, which is a state of the United States in the Pacific Ocean. And they did front page articles. The next thing the national park knew was they were expecting a few submissions, and the first thing they heard was all the art stores on the Big Island of Hawaii were sold out of supplies. And then they were expecting maybe 14 submissions, and they got over 140 as they put it, a tsunami of heart. And it galvanized the whole community. Everybody got very excited about this. It was a wonderful project, and this was the winning painting that was chosen. And as you can see, she looks like a native Hawaiian, and she's holding things in her hands that refer to important native Hawaiian myths connected with Pele. What's also interesting is that from the native Hawaiian point of view, we often think of volcano deities as wrathful. Not really for for Hawaiians, because when the volcano erupts, the lava goes into the sea and it creates new land. So she's considered to be sort of compassionate and also creative and a source of fertility. So this is a ritual hula dance. The famous hula dances, many of them are dedicated to Pele. This was done next to her former crater, which was a sacred spot for her. And another thing that we did that was very interesting, and I'm going to play it for you, is what it came down to was this. I was at a meeting, and the Native Hawaiian elders were very concerned that this is a sacred area, very sacred because of Pele and the volcanoes. And they were concerned that visitors to the national park were treating it or would be treating it like a recreation area or an amusement park. So they wanted them to know they were entering a sacred area. And they were thinking of putting up signs near the entrance to the park or maybe even statues. And I said, well, look, when I drove up to the park yesterday from below, there was signs saying tune into a certain radio station, a certain radio frequency, and you can get information on the park. And everybody does that because they want to know where to go to see the volcano if it's erupting. So you have kind of a captive audience. So they decided to run with it. And one of the people who was in charge of the radio program was Native Hawaiian. And what you're going to hear now is what he wrote and what people would hear coming into the park. And notice how he refers to World Heritage here in terms of sacredness. This is an Asian, a sacred flute.
Aloha, and welcome to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. You may notice a change in the plant and animal life, the climate, or maybe even in the way you feel as you enter the park. Don't be surprised, this is a common occurrence. For centuries, people have felt the power and uniqueness of this place. Hawaiians call it a wahi kapu, or sacred area. It was once reserved only for ali'i, or royalty. You are in the domain of Pele, the volcano goddess. She is embodied in everything volcanic that you see here. This is also home to a forest full of species which are found nowhere else on Earth, and two of the world's most active volcanoes. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is now a World Heritage Site, a modern term for a wahi kapu, recognizing its importance to all of us. As you travel through the park, take a few moments to think about what this place means to you.
So you can see, quite unusual. So the next theme we'll look at is the mountain as either the deity, a deity, or the abode of the deity. And there's a mountain not far from where you are in Dehradun, Nanda Devi, which is the highest mountain in India proper outside of Sikkim, very sacred mountain. It's the goddess of bliss, Nanda Devi. And it's part of a World Heritage Site as well, Nanda Devi in the Valley of Flowers National Park's World Heritage Site. So Nanda Devi is the abode of the goddess Nanda Devi, who is one of the various forms of Parvati, who is the consort. Parvati is the daughter of the mountain, means literally in Sanskrit, the daughter of the mountain being Himalaya. And she's the consort of Lord Shiva, one of the three forms of the supreme deity in Hinduism. And she takes a very important form here. So here, in Almora, which is a hill station south of Nanda Devi, is in a temple dedicated to Nanda Devi, the goddess here you see in the center. When I went there on one occasion, I had a friend who was Indian, and some of the villagers came up and they did a shamanistic ceremony in which a woman became possessed by Nanda Devi, as they were calling her, and here she is in a trance, dancing in the trance. Now we'll go to the next theme, which is that of a temple or place of worship. And what you see here is a city which is not normally thought of as a mountain, but in fact is viewed as a mountain. This is Jerusalem. And Jerusalem in the Bible is a conflation of two sacred mountains, which are Mount Zion and Mount Moriah. And I won't go into too much detail. Zion was the original Jebusite city that King David chose to make the capital of his kingdom. And Moriah is the place where Abraham was supposed to have offered up his son Isaac as a possible sacrifice. Very, very important in Judaism, Christianity, and also in a variance in Islam. And you can see here it's sacred to three different religions, and the later books of the Bible refer to Jerusalem either as the Mount Zion or the Mountain of the Lord, referring to Moriah. So very, very important. And it's sacred to three different religions. In the foreground, you see the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is on it's the third most sacred site in the Muslim world. Behind it over here is a Jewish cemetery, sacred place where many Jews want to be buried. And above is the Mount of Olives, which according to Christianity is where Jesus went after he was resurrected and then ascended for heaven from there. So for Jews, this is a place of pilgrimage, and they come to the remnants of the temple wall. This is the Western Wall, which you see here. Now, it's very interesting. A number of years ago, when I was working with the Mountain Institute, I was a member of the board, and we were in the mountains of West Virginia, not too far from Washington, D.C. And he said, well, we don't have sacred mountains here in the United States. That's something that, well, except for Indians and Tibetans do that, American Indians. And I said, well, we have these sacred places called churches and synagogues. You don't worship them. You go there to worship or to commune. So even in monotheistic religions, mountains can be sacred in the same way as churches, temples, and synagogues and masjids can be places where you worship. You're not worshiping the mountain, but the mountain is an ideal place for communing with something higher. So another theme that's widespread is the theme of the mountain as a garden or earthly paradise. And here you see a mountain in northern Greece called Mount Athos. It's in the northern Aegean Sea. It's a long peninsula, and the peninsula goes down and it culminates in a beautiful mountain about over 2,000 meters high that rises sheer out of the Aegean Sea on three sides. And along the narrow peninsula are 20 Byzantine monasteries for the East. It's a center for Eastern Orthodox mysticism. And you can see some of the monasteries there along the shore. And there are monks who meditate there. This is an iconographer who painted icons. Tell you an amusing story. He's a delightful person. I took his picture and he asked me, what kind of camera are you using? And I said, I'm using an Olympus. That's appropriate for Greece, Mount Olympus. And he said, yes. He said, I have a camera and my camera is a Nikon camera and my name is Father Nikon. Now, Athos is a World Heritage Site, but a very controversial one because the monks ban all women. World Heritage Sites are supposed to be of value for all of humanity, and half of humanity is not allowed to go there. Now, the monks give a theological reason for this, which has to do with the idea of an earthly paradise. They refer to Athos as the garden of the Mother of God. And the Mother of God is the Virgin Mary, and the patron saint of Athos, I won't go into the myths about it, is Mary. And what the monks say is that she's very jealous and will allow no other females. This incidentally, and this is a problem, there's another World Heritage Site that also has this problem and something needs to be done about it, but it is a definite problem. Now, a further one that we get to is mountains as ancestors or places of the dead, either connected with ancestors or ancestors themselves. And you see this highlighted in the sacred mountains of the Maori in New Zealand in the South Pacific. Many of the mountains there are viewed as ancestors who came from the direction of Tahiti in canoes or else from the sky, and they went inland and froze and became the mountains. And each Maori tribe, what's called an iwi, draws its identity and its power from its mountain, which is connected to it through its ancestor. This is one of the most important sacred mountains in all of New Zealand. It's Tongariro. Tongariro is part of a national park, which is also a World Heritage Site, and very important from the point of view of what you're doing in your course, because it was one of the first World Heritage Sites to be declared a combination natural and cultural site, what's called an associative cultural landscape, which is especially important, which means that nature in itself has cultural meaning aside from its natural importance. It also is very important in the sense that Around 1887 or so, English were coming in and colonizing the area, and they were buying up the lower slopes of the mountain to graze their sheep. And the paramount chief of the tribe, whom you see, this is a picture of him, he was very concerned that the mountain would lose its integrity. If that happened, the tribe, his tribe called the Ngati Tufaratoa, would lose its identity, and even more important, it would lose, and he would lose in particular, his mana or sacred power. He had an advisor who suggested that he make a special arrangement with the British Crown, what's called a tuku, to make this into a national park that would be administered by the Maori tribe and the British Crown. And so this was the first national park established in New Zealand and the fourth national park in the world. It was established in 1887, officially designated in 1894. And this was only 12 years after the very first national park in the world was established in the United States in Yellowstone National Park. Now, also, the mountains can be places of the dead, very, very important. And a major sacred mountain in Japan is Koyasan, which you see here, and it has a very impressive cemetery, extends for about 1.5 kilometers with these beautiful trees, many monuments, and it's a long graveyard where people come, and it has an incredible effect with the combination of the trees and so on. It too is part of a World Heritage Site. I was there when it was being designated a UNESCO conference a number of years ago. It's part of the sacred sites and pilgrimage routes in the Key Mountain Range, which is a World Heritage Site. Now, since we're talking about Japan, another very important theme is the mountain as a symbol of identity. And no mountain, I don't think, has come more to symbolize the identity of a people than, or a nation, than Mount Fuji in Japan. The simplicity and beauty of its form, which you can see here in this painting by the Japanese block print and painter Hokusai, very famous Japanese artist, it symbolizes the quest for beauty and simplicity that lies at the heart of so much of Japanese culture. So I won't go into it in too much detail, but Mount Fuji was the focal point for very unique two forms of mountain climbing religion in Japan that brought together the indigenous Shinto religion of Japan with Buddhism that came from China and ultimately from India. And there were practitioners, still are practitioners called, the practice is called Shugendo, and they ritually climb a mountain symbolizing going through the stages toward enlightenment, and also they gain power and bring it back down. Until about 1860, until about 1860, as I said, this kind of religion, Shugendo, was the most prevalent form of religion in villages of Japan. And then it was, I won't go into why it was wiped out. Now, a number of years ago, since this is a national symbol of Japan, the Japanese government wanted to nominate Mount Fuji as a natural World Heritage Site. And they were told by the IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which evaluates natural World Heritage Sites for UNESCO, that they would be turned down because there was too much garbage and trash up on the mountain. This was a real black eye, obviously, for the government, and various organizations formed to clean up the mountain, in particular the Fujisan Club. These are members of it, and they succeeded in cleaning it up, and then the mountain was eventually nominated not as a natural site, but as a cultural site. There are less stringent environmental requirements, and it's now a World Heritage Site. Now, a very important and widespread theme, some people think it's almost universal, is the mountain as a source of various kinds of blessings. This can be water, fertility, life, healing, and so on. So the mountains which you see here are in the United States. These are the San Francisco Peaks in Arizona, south of the Grand Canyon. They're sacred to 13 different tribes, Indian nations. And the largest ones are the Navajo and the Hopi. So these are the two names. Nuvatakyawi is the Hopi name, and Dokoslit is the Navajo name. Now, for the Hopi, who live on mesas about 100 kilometers away. There are no rivers there, and they grow corn, and they depend on what they do is they invoke the rain-bearing ancestral spirits called kachinas of this mountain to come bringing rain clouds in the summer, and they do what are called the famous kachina dances, where they become possessed by the kachinas. You're not allowed to photograph the dances, but this is a kachina dancer, snow kachina, particularly associated with the mountain. And Nuvatokyelve means, in the Hopi language, snow mountain higher than everything else. Now, the Navajo are very different people. They're pastoral, they graze sheep. And so for them, the mountain is part of a series of four mountains that they invoke and use in healing ceremonies. So the mountain is a source of healing. And there are these chantways, and what they do is they draw diagrams in sand of the deities, the holy beings of each mountain. There are four of them that surround the Hopi, the Navajo country. And the idea here is that if a person is sick because they've fallen out of harmony with themselves, with their community, and with the environment. And they've got to be restored to that state of harmony. And you do it through chanting these what are called blessing chantways over them. And the patient is actually put on the actual sand painting, which is being drawn here by a chanter. And here, for example, is an excerpt from one of the most important of what are called chantways, blessing way. Now I am long life, now happiness, as I have ascended, ascended. Before me it is blessed as I have ascended. Behind me it is blessed as I have ascended. I have ascended, oye. The final theme, which is very widespread and is especially important in the modern world, is the theme of the mountain as a place of transformation, revelation, inspiration, and renewal. And the mountain that you see here that I'm using as an example is Huashan. It's in China. There are five famous mountains, the five most important sacred mountains in China. They were associated with the ritual of the emperors in the past. Huashan was the mountain of the of the western direction. The mountain of the eastern direction is actually the most important one, but this is quite spectacular, so I put it in here. And the annals say that back in the third millennium, not the third century before the Common Era, but the third millennium, the earliest emperors would go on ritual tours of inspection of their empire, and in each quarter of the empire, they would climb a sacred mountain to perform sacrifices, establishing their sovereignty over the princes of the realm. So this is the Eastern Mountain, and mountains, if you go into Chinese culture, mountains are extremely important, not only as inspiration for, beautiful poetry, but also landscape painting. But I should also add this mountain in particular was the center of the Taoist religion, still is to a certain extent in China. And the idea there is that monks would come here, hermits, and basically meditate in caves or in these temples in order to become one with the Tao, the spiritual essence that flows through nature in order to attain longevity or immortality, which was the goal of Taoism. And the mountain rises sheer up to a knife edge ridge, and you actually have to walk through these temples along the crest of it. Now, probably the most sophisticated genre of landscape painting in the world, you could argue, is the Chinese. This is a classic from the year 1072 called Early Spring by Guo Xi. And the Chinese term for landscape and landscape painting is shan shui. Shan shui means literally shan is mountain, shui is water. So mountains and rivers are the two basic components of landscape in the Chinese conception, and it's also the term for landscape painting. So this is what Guo Xi, who wrote a primer about landscape painting back in the 11th century, this is what he said about the value of mountains, landscapes, and landscape paintings. The din of the dusty world and the confines of human habitations are what human nature habitually abhors, while on the contrary, haze, mist, and the haunting spirits of the mountains are what human nature seeks and yet can rarely find, something we can all relate to. This is the monastery of St. Catherine, which is part of the St. Catherine area, World Heritage Site in the Sinai Peninsula, south of Israel and now controlled by Egypt. And what you're seeing here is one of the oldest Christian monasteries in the world, the monastery of St. Catherine, at the foot of Jebel Musa, which means the mountain of Moses. And for Christians, this is usually identified as the site of Mount Sinai from the Bible, where Moses receives the tablets of the law and the first five books of the Bible. And that event that took place on this mountain is considered the single most important event in the traditional history of Judaism. It's also extremely important for Christians. This is a Greek Orthodox monastery at the foot, and it's also very important for Islam as well. So it was built, this monastery was built in the 6th century by the Emperor Justinian, the Byzantine emperor from Constantinople, in order to protect desert fathers who were meditating there. Now, mountains, and if you look at the origins, it's certainly in my country of the modern environmental movement, a lot of it you can trace back to writers like John Muir, who founded the Sierra Club and played a major role in instituting national parks. And one of his main reason really for protecting places like Yosemite Valley and Yosemite National Park was as places people could go to for spiritual and physical renewal, which is a major function of sacred mountains in general. And Yosemite National Park is another World Heritage Site. This is Half Dome. And here is a famous quote from him about what you can find in the mountains. Climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Nature's peace will flow into you as sunshine flows into trees. The winds will blow their own freshness into you, and the storms their energy, while cares will drop off like autumn leaves. Now we're going to shift over, and I'm going to give you an example of applying these 10 themes to the proposed nomination of Mount Kailas and the pilgrimage routes leading to it over the Himalayas from Nepal and India. And the where you are located there, the Wildlife Institute of India has been playing a role in this. And in fact, I came and there was a meeting there a number of years ago about this. So this is a Tibetan Tanka painting showing Mount Kailas, and you can see, I won't go into the details, this is the mountain here. Near it is the most sacred lake in the world for many, many people, Lake Manasarovar. And this is the Tibetan Buddhist deity of Mount Kailas, who's called Demchok, the one of supreme bliss, and then Tibet's most famous yogi who meditated up in this area. And there was a contest with an indigenous priest of the Bon religion, which took place there. So you can see here a couple of themes. Well, first of all, there's the mountain. The mountain is the center here. Remember, this has the shape of Mount Meru, which is opening up like a flower. There's a deity. There's a Buddhist deity on top for Buddhists. There's a Hindu deity as Lord Shiva, as we'll see. It's a place of meditation, so transformation. So you can see some of these themes coming out reflected in this Tanka painting. For many Hindus, Kailas is the primary abode, the summit of it, of Lord Shiva, who is one of the three forms of the supreme deity and the one most closely associated with meditation and asceticism. You'll notice on the top of Shiva's head, he's portrayed in paradise on top of Mount Kailas, is a woman's face, and water is issuing out of her mouth. This is a very important, very contemporary myth in India and also very in the past, called the descent of the Ganga. And the story is this: a sage on earth asked the Ganges to come down from heaven and fill up the oceans, which are dry. She didn't want to come down because she was comfortable in heaven, and she said, as an excuse, if I fall to the earth, the weight of my waters will shatter the earth. So Shiva stepped in and said, I'll break the fall of your water with the hair on my head, which is what you see here, and she flows down through the Himalayas. Now, Indian environmentalists have pointed out that this actually corresponds to what happens physically, because during the summer, the Ganges does fall from the heaven in the form of summer monsoon rains, and the Puranas, the ancient texts of Hindu mythology, say that the forests of the Himalayas can be viewed as Shiva's hair. So if the forests have been cut down and are not there, the earth does literally shatter under the impact of this water. There are devastating landslides and floods. So this is a motivation for pilgrims to plant and take care of trees, as we'll see. So this is the Kailas sacred landscape that was mentioned at the beginning. It's on the border. This is the Indian part, Nepal part, and you can see there are pilgrimage routes coming up from India, from Nepal, and then a couple of directions from Tibet, from this direction and that direction. Uh, the idea here was Isimod started this project, the Kailas Sacred Landscape, and they asked me to come and consult with them to help guide them through the process of getting the area, or at least part of it, nominated as a World Heritage Site. So the idea was the Kailas Sacred Landscape is in three different countries, and the idea was to you've got to really manage the territory, and it's too a large territory to be able to manage and control. So, in particular, in the meetings at WII, we came to the conclusion the best way to do it was to restrict the World Heritage Site along the major pilgrimage routes and then the mountain and the major lake, which you see here. Now, when you make a World Heritage nomination, one of the most important things to do is you have to do a comparative analysis and show why this is a new site, why it's different from others, and why it should be designated as a World Heritage Site. So here's where the 10 themes and framework come in. You'll see on the left, these are mountains that are parts of existing World Heritage Sites. We've seen several of them: Everest, Nanda Devi, Athos. I noticed some people here from Kenya. Kilimanjaro is one. Tongariro, we've seen Kilauea, and we saw Koya. Now, here are the 10 themes going across, and you'll notice each one of these was nominated. This is the main themes for which each one was nominated. And if you look, Kailas hasn't been nominated yet, but it has more checks than any of the others. So it's a supremely good candidate to be a World Heritage Site. But there's a problem, which is we'll get to shortly in terms of the nomination. Now, I assume most of you are well aware of World Heritage, but just to bring it up to speed, of course, the main concept, the key concept, is outstanding universal value, which is cultural and or natural significance that is so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and be of common importance for present and future generations of all humanity. So this outstanding universal value is the main focus of a World Heritage nomination: what's evaluated, why a property is inscribed, and what needs to be sustained through management, and so on. Now, in order to nominate a site, there are 10 criteria that are used. 6 of them are cultural and 4 are natural. And here are 2 criteria. You don't have to use all criteria. It's better to make a stronger case if you have a few criteria, which are good, strong ones, rather than trying to use a lot of criteria. But here are 2 criteria that would apply well to Kailas. The first is to be directly or tangibly associated with events or living traditions, with ideas or with beliefs, with artistic and literary works of outstanding universal significance. Certainly Kailas fits that. And then that's a cultural one. A natural one be it contains superlative natural phenomena or areas of exceptional natural beauty and aesthetic importance. One of the reasons it's so much more important a mountain culturally than Everest is it stands out by itself, and it's a beautiful smooth dome like a stupa or a relic mount. So I mentioned that we were trying to get this nominated as a transboundary site. So why would you make the complications of getting 3 countries involved, namely China, India, and Nepal, because the countries themselves, the states, have to do the nomination? Well, it's very simple. The first reason is very practical. UNESCO only allows 1 or 2, maybe I think now it's 1 nomination a country can make in a year. Now, China is very big on World Heritage, and they have a long queue of places they want to nominate. Kailas isn't even on the list yet. So if you just nominated Kailas, it would have to be nominated by China, since Tibet is now part of China, and it could be 50 or 100 years before Kailas ever got nominated. However, if you do a transboundary nomination of 2 or 3 countries, it can be on the quota of only one of those countries. And when we were working on this, Nepal hadn't nominated anything in a while, so it could have been number 1. And Kailas is especially important, even more important for the people of India than the Han people of China, so it could be moved up. And WII was very interested in working on this and at least nominating the Indian part, the pilgrimage routes going there. The other reason is UNESCO really likes transboundary nominations because, among other things, they help promote peaceful cooperation and they improve relations among the different countries. So, as I come to an end, here's a often quoted uh, a quote from the Skanda Purana. These are works of ancient Hindu mythology about the importance of Himalaya in general and Kailas in particular. In the space of 100 ages of the gods, I could not describe to you the glories of Himachal, another word for Himalaya. As the dew is dried up by the morning sun, so are the sins of humankind by the sight of Himachal. So I've touched on just a very few mountains, and if you're interested in a lot more mountains, and some of them in the countries you're in, you might want to take a look at my book on Sacred Mountains of the World, the second edition, which Cambridge University Press published a few years ago, and it's available published in the UK. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. And now it'd be great. We could just open it up to uh, questions you may have and points you'd like to raise. And, I'd love to hear about your mountains as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, for that fantastic presentation. And so many things we learned in this short space of 45 minutes. So I'm sure our heads are packed with a lot more information than we had earlier. Now, for the class, I would request anyone who has questions for Dr. Birnbaum to come up to the screen. Just mention your name and your country. And if you have any questions for Dr. Birnbaum, please go ahead and make those questions, ask those questions. Madhumita, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think they're still processing. No, no question.
Yeah, yeah. But Dr. Birnbaum, I really appreciated that you brought in elements like the video and the audio of Kilaueo because that adds a very spectacular dimension to the experience. And thank you for sharing those lived experiences with us. I just wanted to know, since you brought up that renewal is kind of a modern approach, meaning people going to the mountains to refresh themselves is relatively new in human history, right? But do you feel that there is scope for focusing on that in current days? Because, as we go along, the spiritual values and the religious values are a little bit on the decline, I would say, of course, it's a cycle. Sometimes they come, comes and goes. But do you feel that there needs to be special focus on the refreshing the capabilities of mountains, and of course, unfortunately, that means over tourism. So, how do you propose to balance that in terms of appealing to a modern
Mhm.
sensibility?
Yes, well, I mean, for example, we have a number of for example, the Sierra Club here where I live in California, that promotes the idea, or WWF. They do touch on the sort of spiritual side of things. There are, I think, a lot of people who go out and they have an experience in nature. I'll give you an example. When I started our project with the Mountain Institute, I was put in touch with the director of all the national parks on the west coast of the United States. And I was talking about the cultural and spiritual importance of of nature and mountains and something like that. And I could see he was rather dubious about it. And then what became very interesting was I almost saw light bulbs going off. It reminded him of why he'd gotten involved in working for national parks because he'd had experiences in nature of, a sense of wonder, of awe, of feeling one with it. And it got him really interested in. And he said, I was talking to the deputy director of the entire U.S. National Park Service a year ago, telling him, we were reminiscing about how when we were young, we talked about the transcendent value of nature. And then somebody said, what do you mean by transcendent? And we couldn't define it, so we had to stop talking about it. But you find a lot of people are drawn to it. And and it's in hidden ways. It's very important, and I think it's something very necessary because there's a sense people go out they may not think about it in terms of, outward spirituality or religious practice, but you go out and you get inspired. Why do people go to these beautiful places? Many of the spots that are being selected as World Heritage Sites. Of course, the problem is you've got, huge numbers of people going. And of course, there's a clash between tourism and maintaining the authenticity of the experience of the places. So, for example, I showed you Mount Athos. Athos
Mhm.
is not open to tourists in general. You have to go through, or at least when I did, you had to go through a complicated process and get special permission to go, and you went by boat and you were treated as a pilgrim. But a lot of monks, there's another spot in Greece, very spectacular, called Meteora, where the spires of rock with monasteries on top. They've become the focal point of tourism, to the point that most of the monks have had to leave because they can't practice religion there. It's just no, they've gone to Mount Athos. So it is a real problem, and it's a major thing that you'll be dealing with in your course, which is, the basically the management of a place. How do you keep it from being destroyed? World
Right.
Heritage sites in particular are the most famous and premier sites, and they get a lot of attention. And what do you do to
Mhm.
keep, the very values and what people want there from being overrun? It's a very
Right.
important question. And
Yeah.
also,
Thank you for.
there are in the past, there have been, I didn't deal with it, but you mentioned the Badrinath project. There's no time for it. But, in the past, there have been measures where, because places are sacred or they're culturally important, they've been protected. But now, they've got to be adapted to the modern times. And how do you do that? So it's really a deep question that is worth a lot of exploration, especially in a course like yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, for that insight. I think there is a question in the classroom. So, could you, someone please come up, or maybe just as a message being sent to Dr. Bernbaum? I just, uh, Nagabita, you had a question? Okay, we have a
Yeah, can
question.
someone introduce yourself and
So good morning, Dr. Breman. My name is Kennedy. I'm from Kenya. And I have seen one of our mountains that has been mentioned there is Mount Kenya. So maybe my question would be, could we say that Mount Kenya has a bit of combination of being a cultural heritage and a natural heritage? Because for the natural aspect, we categorize it because of the alpine ecosystem and the forested landscapes, but also because of the cultural aspect. One of the myths that is there in the one of the mythical theories that is there is about the origin of mankind, especially the Gikuyu and Mombi, whereby it is said that the god of the day used to live on the mountain, and he created the 9 daughters who married off the 9 sons, and that was the origin of mankind. So it creates a very important historical and cultural connotation. So yeah, thank you. That's my question. Thank you, sir.
Oh, no, Mount Kenya is a very important one. And often I speak about Mount Kenya. In fact, I have chapters on different areas of the world. In the chapter on Africa, I focus on two mountains, Mount Kenya and Kilimanjaro. But as you mentioned, it's very important to the Kikuyu. And Jomo Kenyatta, who was the founder in many ways of the modern state of Kenya, and I think the first prime minister of Kenya, he was an anthropology student earlier, and he wrote a book about, as I'm sure you're well aware of, about the Kikuyu people, called Facing Mount Kenya, because that was the basic ritual. Whenever you had a marriage ceremony, whatever it was, the first thing you did was you faced Mount Kenya and invoked the deity on the summit of Mount Kenya. Very, very important. And I think that still is important for many people in Kenya, especially the Kikuyu. And of course, there are other or groups that view it in other ways. But I'm glad you brought up Kenya, Mount Kenya. I've climbed Point Lenana, traversed over the mountain, but I haven't done the really difficult ones. But it is a beautiful mountain and a very important mountain.
we have another question from the room.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I think I'm clear. Good morning. My name is Mario from South Sudan. You mentioned something about Jebel Mosa or Mount Sinai.
Yes.
I've not been clear about why it has been nominated. It has been because of Ten Commandments, which Christians believe in, or because of other miracles which happened in that Jebel. Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. The focus of the nomination is it's called the St. Catherine area nomination. So the focus is the monastery, which is, as I say, one of the oldest monasteries in the world. It's traditionally on the site, built on the site traditionally of the burning bush. So and Jebel Musa is included in it. There's a chapel on top. Yeah, the other interesting thing about it is that there have been many different candidates from the Mount Sinai of the Bible. So this is the one that's important for Christians, not necessarily for Jews. And when I went there, I had conversations with the abbot of the monastery. He's Archbishop Damiamos at the time, Greek Orthodox, and he said, I think there are two reasons why we think this is Mount Sinai, where the tablets of the law and so on took place. Um, it's also Mount Sinai is also mentioned in the Quran as well, so it's important for Muslims too, not just Christians and Jews. But he said one is uh, desert fathers, Christian desert fathers, went to meditate in that area around the second century of the Common Era, and one reason he thought was that it would have been such an impressive event when it happened with thunder and lightning, the way it's described in the Bible, that it would have made a tremendous impact on the local people, the Bedouin. So they would have maintained a tradition and then told the Desert Fathers when they came, this is the place. The other reason is the mystical one, which is one of these monks was meditating there and had a vision in which it was revealed to him. So that's, from within the tradition. There's an interesting what happened around late 1980s after Israel gave the Sinai back to Egypt. The Egyptian government announced plans to build a cable car up to the top of Mount Sinai and to put a casino in there on the summit. A casino meant more like a restaurant. But this aroused consternation all over the world. And Time magazine had an end piece. People really objected very strongly. So it was never done.
Right. Loretta? Okay. Sorry, Ed, to keep you past your time. It seems like a lot of questions come.
Good morning.
Yeah.
My name is Mama Shoka from Lesotho.
Uh-huh.
From your presentation, I have realized that these sacred mountains, they are the heritage sites. So what I want to know is, how do visitors react to these sacred mountains? For instance, in Zion and Mount Moriah, it's a Christian sacred place. I want to know if everybody is permitted to visit that place regardless of their religion. Because what I want to know is if anything harmful can happen to a person if he is not of that, he's not believing in that sacred place, but he or she wants to visit that place.
If I understand your question, you're asking, are certain places, are they off limits? I mean, a place can be, I'm not sure if I understood your question, but I'm answering perhaps in a way. Some mountains are sacred, and in fact, the environment and the natural landscape is protected because they're forbidden. You're not allowed to go there. And so that protects it. So that can happen. There are a number of, for example, mountains for example, there are mountains in Bhutan. I think somebody in the course is in Bhutan. There are at least one or two mountains. Chomoladi, the western mountain, has been climbed, but now no longer allowed to be climbed because it's too sacred. And there's another mountain which has never been climbed. There's a mountain in Nepal called Machapuchar, the fishtail peak above Pokhara, which is off limits to climbers. It's been designated that way. So the other thing I should point out is that when mountains are sacred, especially when they become symbols of identity, it's not just a spiritual thing that's happening. It becomes a symbol. It becomes part of who you are and your identity. So, for example, here in the United States, there's a mountain called Mount Rainier up in the northwest part of the United States near the city of Seattle. And like Fuji, it's become a symbol of the Northwest. People identify with it, and they get very excited when the mountain comes out of the clouds. And you'll find all sorts of billboards and so on that use the mountain as a symbol, as an icon. So when you look at sacred mountains, you should not just look at them as sort of places where people have spiritual or religious experiences, but also they're culturally extremely important.
Thank you,
I'm
Ed,
not sure.
for that. Yeah. Thank you for the insight. I think that was her question to a certain extent. Madhumita, any other questions?
If Dr. Edwin is game for it, we have one last question.
Yes, Dr. Irwin, I hope it's fine. One last question.
Oh, sure, fine. Yeah, no problem. If I can
Good
understand it.
morning.
The sound is not so good here, so I may not be able to follow the speak slowly.
Hmm.
But loud.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Mane Habib from Ghana. You made mention of Mountain Kaleo, which is a home of Pele. It's a secret place for Hawaiian people that is a rocky place. So I don't know, it's a cultural heritage site or a natural heritage site. Consider both is a secret place for worship for Hawaiian people, and then it's also a eruption that continues during ages.
So you were asking about Kilauea in Hawaii or a mountain that's erupting where you are?
It's a
I think
cultural heritage site or it's a natural heritage site.
Uh-huh.
The
Yeah.
nomination, whether it was based on the cultural heritage site or it's a natural heritage site or mixed.
Oh,
I
well,
want you to clarify.
yeah, right. Yeah, no, to me, the most interesting sites are the mixed ones, mixed natural and cultural. And then, of course, when they're evaluated by ICOMOS and the IUCN. But there is a category that UNESCO came up with, they haven't used very much, but I think is very important that should be revived, which is the idea of an associative cultural landscape, which means that, the landscape in and of itself, whether it has any human-made features on it, is culturally important. And there were several mountains. Uluru in Australia was one of the first.
I think Dr. Bernbaum might have lost connection. We'll give him a minute to come back. You can hear me, right, classroom? I think Dr.
Yeah,
Bernbaum, yeah,
wait
yeah.
for a few minutes. Meanwhile, we'll set up the other. No, presently.
I think Dr. Bernbaum might have a internet issue.
Got done.
Sorry, we lost connection with you, right? You can go ahead. You were talking about this. You were talking about.
Yeah. No. Yes. So I think the last person was from Ghana.
Yes.
So
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
right. So are you familiar? There's been a lot of work done on the sacred groves in Ghana. Um, Very important. And I wonder if you're familiar with the sacred groves in Ghana, the questioner who just asked me a question.
Habib, are you
Can hear
familiar with this
you.
Are you familiar with the sacred groups? What is happening?
of Ghana?
Sacred groups.
Yes. We have some forests that it's a secret place that they're supposed not to, people not supposed to go.
Yes.
Yes.
He is familiar.
And then we also have some of the mountains that during Easter time, people go there for worship and other lessons. So all these things will just come out.
Very good. I was going to
Yes.
add that, one of the things.
Especially,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
yes, Apuape Mountains.
yes, people go there during Easter time to offer prayers and other places. So it's a secret place for Christians.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Amen.
Since you're, and this would tie it in with sacred groves as well. Since you're talking about mountains and the focus of your workshop is mountains, one of the things about mountains is that if you take a mountain as a whole, from its base to its summit, a mountain has every ecosystem in it potentially. And in fact, in Hawaii, it's even, under the ocean because one of the mountains in Hawaii, Mauna Kea, is the tallest mountain in the world from base to summit, since its base is about 6,000 meters underneath the ocean.
Yes,
So,
yes,
so I think, what you see highlighted in mountains has applicability. I mean, we've been talking here about these themes connected with mountains, but they also apply to many other World Heritage or natural cultural heritage sites that may not be mountainous, but have, flora and fauna that are similar.
Yes, it's true. The reason why I asked the question is that is the Fuji Mountain in Japan. It's only classified as a cultural heritage site. Meanwhile, it's also have a natural heritage site. It's have the science of like the landscape. It's also one of the tallest mountains in the world. So I want to clarify whether it's a mixed or it's
Mhm.
a natural heritage site or it's a cultural heritage site or it's both.
Yeah.
For the Hawaii Mountain.
yeah. So I think what I understand from Habib's question is he's asking about why are these sites which have clear natural values like Mount Fuji and Kilauea classified only as natural or only as cultural, and there is obviously natural attributes to Fuji which were not recognized in terms of World Heritage. It's just a cultural site per se. Likewise, he brought up Kilauea earlier, which is which has both cultural and natural significance. So he was asking, are there any kind of strong ways to determine something, or is there a change in the conversation in terms of looking at things more holistically? So I don't know if I'm paraphrasing
Oh,
for him,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're going to be talking in your course, I noticed, of nature cultural linkages. And that's
Yes,
something that UNESCO has been pushing, especially the IUCN. Yeah, that's become something that's much more important, and there's a lot of work being done on that. And in fact, almost any natural site probably has cultural value as well, because,
yes, yes.
it's an important natural site. It also has importance. And in a sense, you could even say science is a form of culture too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I think that's a great note to end this call on, because you brought two important things which I was uh, bringing up in my heritage introduction yesterday. First is the example of Mount Rainier. So heritage is not something static; it is being built as we go along. So
Right.
I was lucky enough to on my West Coast tour of the USA. I was lucky enough to see Mount Rainier very
Oh, you
clearly,
did.
and I could see the celebration of it being seen as well, because Seattle is used to rainy and cloudy weather, so they were really happy. And
Right.
yeah, I could see the cultural importance of mountain rising, and who knows, in maybe 1,000 years time, that becomes part of some sort of a quasi religion as well, right? So
Well,
that's
you'll be
how it
pleased.
is.
Yeah. Well, you'll be pleased to know, we worked with Mount Rainier National Park on this
Oh,
project.
fantastic!
And one of the things we did was we had a traveling exhibit on,
Hmm.
Mount Rainier as being a cultural icon, a natural cultural icon. And we were relating it to mountains from, in the United States, we have a lot of people from different parts of the world, and the National Park Service is very interested in opening the park and getting more visitors from so-called minorities like Hispanics or, Asian Americans and so on, who haven't been going so much to the park. So we were trying to connect with their backgrounds. So on this exhibit, we had a whole section as another iconic mountain was Kailas. So
Of
it was
course,
there
of
with
course.
Mount Rainier.
That's fantastic, Ed. So this is an endlessly fascinating conversation. I really want to continue this as well. But in the interest of time and interest of letting you have a good night's sleep, I actually made a lot of notes from your class as well. So I would love to share them via email to you
Okay,
so that
sure.
we can
Let's stay in
continue this
touch.
conversation. And this is the first Search Mountain course, but we hope to keep repeating it over the years. So we will definitely love to stay in touch with you. And one last request, Ed, since we will be putting up a small tweet or a Instagram post about your class online, if there is any institution or your social media handle or any particular organization which you would like to be notified of this talk, we would love to
Okay.
include them as well. So maybe you can drop us an email to Dr. Madhumita saying that we need to tag these organizations. We would love to do that as well. And
Okay, good. Why
this,
don't you send me an email asking me about that so I'll remember it
I'll do,
when
I'll
I
do
get
that.
it.
I'll do
That
that.
sounds very good.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's
Well, I
fantastic.
want to wish you
Yeah,
all the best and have a very, worthwhile and enriching course. And it sounds like you'll have doing stuff that's really very worthwhile.
yes,
So,
they'll
and
be visiting.
I envy you there at the foot of the Himalaya.
Hmm. Yes, yes, yes. No, we hope to have you back here as well. 2016 was a long time ago, so we hope that there
Right.
is occasion and cause for you to come back to India, and we love to
Right.
host you. We are in Dehradun as well. These guys will be visiting the Nanda Devi area with a few experts, so that should be memorable for them as well. But thank you again so much, Ed, for your
Okay.
time,
Well,
and
thank you.
we'll definitely stay in touch. I hope that this is the first of many interactions. Thank you,
Good.
thank you.
Very good.
Yeah,
All
take
my
care,
best,
and
everyone.
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ed. Bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.